Hi class, this is Professor Morrison. This presentation is regarding how to create a working thesis statement for an argument of fact essay. This is a working thesis statement. We want to make sure to call it our working thesis because just like every other part of our essay, it's subject to change and revision. There is always room for improvement, and we want to give our thesis statement permission to flow and change just like every other part of our essay. Nothing is written in stone. So we start with what we think we might have for a thesis, and then we make it better. And if it needs to keep changing while we're revising, that's wonderful. We should let that happen. So you want to think about the subject that you're writing about. What's your main idea? How do you plan on supporting it in your essay? What is the counter argument? And then create something that's just a really rough draft of your thesis statement so that you can fix it. Here's an example of a working thesis statement for an argument essay that I came up with kind of on the spot. Remember that we're working on an argument of fact essay, but this is a really good general format for most types of argument. So my example is, teachers should not be armed because they are already overburdened, they lack training, and they should focus on teaching. We see that that's not terrible, but it could definitely be better. Now we have a starting point. You can't revise a blank page. We have a working thesis that we can now bend and mold and shape the way that we want it to. So let's start our new working thesis based on the one that we just wrote. This is part of our revision process. So first off, what is the overall counterargument to the thesis you just created, to the main idea? You're going to try and put that very briefly into 3 or 4 words at the most. Use an although clause or even though to represent the counter argument, and end it with a comma because it's a dependent clause. And we're going to split this sentence into 3 sections, and this is the first section. So we're not ending our sentence, we're going to end this clause with a comma, and then we're going to move on to the next part of the sentence. So as I'm trying to make my working thesis better, I decided that I should start with this counter argument. Although it may be argued that more first responders should be present in the classroom, comma, now your turn. For the next part of our thesis statement, we're going to insert the main idea, which is our stance on this controversial issue, after the comma. So you're going to think of a more specific, concise way to phrase your main idea than you originally wrote in the very first part of this activity. So here I've tried to condense my thoughts and make them a little bit more articulate. And my example is, for my main idea only, teachers should not be required to be armed. It's really nice when we're able to say should or should not, but not every argument will allow us to do this. Okay, now it's your turn to write your new main idea. Now for the last part of our sentence, we're going to add because, and then insert 3 brief reasons in parallel form that support our main idea. And remember, we want to keep our thesis statements around about 25 words or less, right? So here's my example of 3 brief reasons that support my main idea. Because they have a responsibility to teach as their primary objective, they are not trained to handle weapons effectively, and security guards or sworn deputies are more qualified to prevent access and to protect students. Okay, now it's your turn to write these 3 brief reasons. Remember that you will have a body section that matches each reason. Okay, moment of truth. Now we're going to put it all together into one sentence to see if it makes sense as a thesis statement. Although it may be argued that more first responders should be present in the classroom, teachers should not be required to be armed because they have a responsibility to teach as their primary objective, they are not trained to handle weapons effectively, and security guards or sworn deputies are more qualified to prevent access and to protect students. How does yours read? You can always go back and change it. Now you should have a much better working thesis statement to help you to stay on topic with your argument for your essay. Remember that this is the format you are required to use for your argument of fact essay, and each essay type has a slightly different thesis statement format or formula that you can follow. But for your argument of fact essay, this is the one that you will be using. So, what did you learn today? Did it help you? Are you more comfortable with your thesis statement now that we have this activity? I hope you are, but if you have any questions, please always feel free to ask me. Happy writing!